focus with 1 week to go before the elections. Cannot believe it's already almost upon us. All of us are asking who are the right people to vote for, and people are reflecting on their lived experiences. How is local government helping them live their lives more easily? We have reporters across the country trying to answer this question. I'm going to be speaking to three of them now. Lindsay Dentliger is in Cape Town, Mawande Kheswa is in Durban, Pule Letshwiti-Jones is in Lichtenburg in the Northwest Province. Pule, I'm going to start with you. I'll start with you, Pule. Just tell us, what have you been doing today? What have you been finding out, and what have people been saying to you?
Very good afternoon, Sunny. Just 2 weeks ago, this is an area that we visited due to protests that have sparked.
You're still on it? Really?
Actually received today, where voters are now looking at, casting their hopes and putting their hopes on independent candidates and opposition parties. Do you remember about 3 weeks ago, the ANC NEC member Obed Bapela was here to ensure voters that they would speak to some municipal officials and ensure that they could accelerate service delivery as a party. Fast forward to 3 weeks later, which is today, these promises haven't still been implemented. In fact, community members are worried that whichever party they'll be voting for this time around will be having the same problems for the next 5 years. But we spoke to one of the community members earlier on, and he had quite a lot to say about what voting for some of these parties has done to their communities.
As community of Bladeville, we don't fight for position. We don't need positions. What we need service in our location. We need the issue of switch to be attended. We need issue of electricity to be attended. We need issues of houses to be attended. And the other thing that I want to emphasize on it is the people of this area. People who are doing this, our leaders and our administrators, they are sitting in the nice houses and everything. This thing that they don't affect them. So I'm saying this, let them hear the cry of the community of Bladeville. Let them remove these people from this side. You can see that, look how it is. It's sewage everywhere. So please, we plead with all the leaders and the government.
Oh my word! I mean, that is a terrible thing to live with. Deeply unpleasant, but also the issue of dignity that we expect people to live like this is absolutely appalling. Pule, Mawande, I want to bring you in. You've been around Umlazi area today. You've been speaking to residents. What are their lived experiences?
Really, residents had one thing to say, or one thing in common that they all said, and it was that there are a lot of things that still need to be done in their communities, particularly in the way of water, in the way of electricity. We spoke to one resident on camera who mentioned issues of constant water cuts once it hits 7 p.m. or so. Constant electricity cuts without any explanations. So much so that he's now despondent and does not see the need for him to vote. Let's take a listen to what he further had to say.
Issues, like for instance the one that I've mentioned to you with regards to the water cut. There's a child who passed away because of a fire that broke down at night. There was no water. There was a person also in the same area who almost died because he was able to get out of the house. There was no water. Had there been water, we were going to be able to turn off the fire. But now the question is, if I go and vote, what difference will it make for me and my community? A neighbor of mine have been reporting to the municipality they have an electricity problem. One of the meters that they've given to them, ever since they gave them that meter, it's not working. Even today, it's not working. Now, they've been going to the municipality, different places, from Isipingo, Chatsworth, and everything. They've been reporting the same matter, but the same municipality doesn't care about them. They've never provided. They now have to ask for other neighbors to connect their electricity from them so that they will have power, because the municipality is not working. So, me alone, it is my decision, as it's your decision as well. I'm not going to vote for a government that doesn't want to work for the community.
Yeah, and I mean, that is the real consequence, is that people might have lost so much trust in government, they just decide they don't want to vote. Mawande, did you get a sense of whether the view of the gent that you interviewed is a view that many hold in this area?
From the people that we spoke to off camera, majority of them do want to vote, but the sentiments around the issues of water, the issues of electricity, are something that is a common thread amongst the people there. We also visited another area as well in Pinetown, and it is exactly one and the same, different demographic to that of Umlazi. And what we found there is that they have similar complaints around the supply of water, electricity, roads, and so forth. So really, whichever community you go to, no matter the demographics, there will be those issues that they have. There will be similarities that they have, but also there will be those differences. But all in all, they do have issues that they say they need to be addressed. They were unhappy with the councillor in Umlazi. They were also unhappy with the councillor in Pinetown as well.
It's interesting, Mawande, that you draw the line between different demographic groups, different economic groups, but similar unhappiness. And I'm going to bring in Lindsay Dentliger, who's been out and about in Cape Town today. Lindsay, what have you been picking up from the people that you speak to? Cape Town prides itself on being a city that works.
Sally, not all communities feel that Cape Town is that city that works for you, that according to the DA gets things done. I've been in several impoverished communities today, some that were, like for example, Lichtenburg, established at the time of the forced removals in the city so many years ago, yet they say from that time their infrastructure has not been developed. I was in Gugulethu today, where big buses struggle to move past a thoroughfare because the road is so potholed. Many communities telling me that the sewage systems in their communities simply don't work. They're bubbling over, they're causing health and other kinds of risks. So they do not feel that this city that prides itself as being the best run metro in the country is delivering equally to all communities. I was in Lichtenburg a little earlier today, where I spoke to a community activist who said that impoverished communities are getting even poorer because they simply cannot afford tariffs for water and electricity. But let's take a listen to what she told me about the community where she's lived since the early 1980s.
There's been no real development in the area of infrastructure, you know. So we've been battling to have our libraries and schools and so on upgraded. And so my fund for this city is, this is a city where you have an island of affluence for the rich, in a big sea of poverty for the poor. And the poor is drowning in this poverty, in all the lack of resources and services that we get.
Lindsay, that is quite an indictment on the city of Cape Town. Is this also an indictment on ward councillors, do you think?
Well, several of the communities I went to today, I think the general feeling, and Sally, that's not just in impoverished communities. I also spoke to a civic association in a middle-class area of the city where they are railing against that very controversial development of an urban park where Amazon will base its headquarters, saying they've had the same councillor for 20 years, a DA councillor. Over 30 people are vying to be the councillor in that area to take over, but almost none of them actually live in the area, Sally. And so I think what is a general sentiment expressed across many is the lack of accountability of these ward councillors. Many feel that because they don't live in these communities, they don't not necessarily not just understand the problems, but they just don't engage. They don't meet with communities. They're not seen around often enough, and they don't take responsibility for anything that happens there, or in this case, the very little that happens in many of these communities. And I think it speaks to a broader aspect of the political system in South Africa, not only on a local government level. This has been raised on a national level as well, that people who represent people should be part of those communities. And so one civic association has been holding town halls. They've been interviewing these over 30 candidates who want to be ward councillors in this particular area where many of them don't even live. Sally, here again, Valdila de Vries from Mannenberg, talking to me about the role or the lack thereof that they find that their councillors play in their communities.
I think there's a legislation which says ward councillors must consult with communities and they must have a meeting at least once a quarter. That doesn't happen. And there's this groupings that they consult with amongst themselves, but not the broader community. And I think that communities must be made more aware of the city's budget. Because for me, the city's budget will tell you where development takes place. And development, unfortunately, is not taking place in the poorer areas. You only need to analyze the city's budget to see that.
So, Lindsay, do you think that these concerns are enough to quell the appetite to vote? Or do you think that we're going to see votes for smaller residence-based associations or independents?
Sally, it's very hard to tell. There are so many parties vying for attention here. Many people, as we know, not just in this city, loyalty is key. And so I think some people would rather refrain from voting altogether rather than vote for another party because their allegiance lies historically with perhaps the ruling party. And so to go against it, they would feel that they were letting their generation, letting down their older generations down. And so they would rather not vote. But I think people generally continue to feel that they have to go out there, that if they don't make their voices heard, they can't expect change in their communities. And so I spoke to some traders in Athlone today. I think they remain hopeful, as much as they are disillusioned. They remain hopeful that by voting, things can change for them. But they are very disillusioned, Sally, many communities across the city with the kind of service or lack thereof that they've received from the DA-run city over the last 15 years, Sally.
Thank you, Lindsay. Well, Pule in Lichtenburg, I want to bring you back in. I started with you, and having listened to your colleagues and what they've picked up through the day, Lindsay saying that even though people are somewhat disillusioned in Cape Town, they're likely, her sense is they're still going to vote. Whereas in KwaZulu-Natal, Mawande saying quite a few people saying they're just not going to bother. What is the feeling that you've gotten from the people that you have spoken today in the Northwest Province?
Well, Sally, just like Mawande said as well, and listening to Lindsay, most of the residents and community members are willing to vote. The only factor then that comes into play here is the lack of service delivery. And what this does now, it actually, imposes the idea that despite any party they vote for, that the lack of service delivery will remain the same for the past years that they've been experiencing right now. And as much as most of them are willing to vote this time around, what we are seeing in terms of the political dynamics are a shift of some of ANC members now moving into other opposition parties. For example, we look at yesterday where a party called Forum for Service Delivery welcomed about 400 ANC members into their parties, 14 of them being ANC councillors, including a council speaker of a very predominant municipality in the Northwest. So, which speaks to the fact that people are now looking at various opposition parties as options which they believe could advocate that service delivery they have been seeking for. But also critically, Sadly, what we are seeing now is that in this municipality, we're seeing independent candidates as well who are coming on the rise. We spoke to one of them today who said that there was about 100 members who were willing to actually go in his direction, ensure that they can put him in a place of power and position where he could have the influence to accelerate service delivery. So as much as people are quite fed up with the current administration that they're saying has not been delivering services for some time, they are now pinning their hopes on opposition parties which they believe can deliver those services they ought to be having for quite some time.
It's going to be a very interesting week indeed. Pule Letshwiti-Jones in Lichtenburg in the Northwest, Mawande Kheswa in Durban, and Lindsay Dentliger in Cape Town. Thanks to all of you for just giving us a sense of what ordinary South Africans are thinking and feeling 1 week ahead of the elections. Very interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be so interesting. I'm sure more and more South Africans are going to be very vocal about what they want done and whether or not they trust politicians.
Yeah. So it's a big feature of our news this week, but there's lots of other absolutely fascinating stories, including this one, which is coming up next on SA Tonight.